All right, we're back after lunch. This is item number 20. It's from planning. Madam Clerk.
Item 20 is to conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution establishing Agricultural Preserve and Williamson Act Contract Number 362 for Stephen Simonich and Denise Simonich Pombo.
And I will open the public hearing. Mr. Bauer?
Okay, here we
Gina?
go. So just like the past, this item actually is two separate action items back to back. The first one is the establishment of the contract. Second action will be for the zoning amendment to establish the ag reserve zoning. So what we have is an application for Agriculture Preserve and Williamson Act Contract 362 for Stephen Simonich and his sister Denise Simonich Pombo. The parcels consist of 4 contiguous parcels totaling 345.4 acres of land located out off of 4th Crossing Road in San Andres. The agricultural operation currently is approximately 33 head of cattle grazing on dry pasture. Historically, the land has been used for the past 100 years for cattle grazing. The farm advisor did a feasibility study on the property, finding the land is capable of meeting the minimum annual income from production, which happens to be $2,000. Your Ag Advisory Committee and your Agricultural Commissioner both reviewed the application, took it under consideration, and their recommendation to you is to establish the contract. In addition, the entire thing went before your Planning Commission, and they too have recommended to you to establish the contract and approve the zoning, making findings that the application meets all the minimum requirements necessary. In addition, that the land demonstrates its ability to sustain a viable agriculture operation.
Any board questions? Is there a member from the applicant here? Would you like to say anything? No? Okay. Okay. All right. No board questions at all, then we'll open up to public. Is there any public comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing and bring it back to the board for any deliberations, questions, or a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll move the item. Second.
I have a motion by Supervisor Oliveira, a second by Supervisor Garamendi. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to item number 21.
Item 21 is from the Planning Department to conduct a public hearing and adopt an ordinance approving the zoning amendment from residential agricultural to agriculture preserve, recognizing the establishment of Agricultural Preserve and Williamson Act Contract Number 362 for Stephen Simonich and Denise Simonich Pombo.
Okay, so second half. This is an ordinance to amend the zoning from the current residential agriculture and unclassified zone districts to the Ag Preserve zoning, signifying the Williamson Act. In addition, authorizing the summary publication.
Any board questions? No? The applicant have anything to say on this? No? Okay, is any public comments? Seeing none, I'm sorry, I needed to open the hearing, and the hearing is open. No board comments or questions. Is there any public comments? No public comments. I will close the hearing, bring it back to the board for a motion or comments or discussion.
Mr. Chair, I'll move this item.
A motion by Supervisor Oliveira.
Second.
Second by Supervisor Garamendi. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to item number 22. Again, this is a planning item.
Item 22 is from the Planning Department to conduct a public hearing and adopt an ordinance rescinding Ordinance 2771, which approved Development Agreement 200019 for the Oak Canyon Ranch Specific Plan for purposes of establishing an Agriculture Preserve and Williamson Act Contract Number 354 for 3,171.72 acres for the Arola Trust. Authorize the summary publication and authorize the board chair to sign cancellation and rescission agreement.
Planning, Gina, you're,
Little more involved with this particular one, so we put together just a little short PowerPoint presentation. So again, the application before you is a 4 different actions, all for the establishment of a Williamson Act contract for William and Dolores Arola. So all for the purpose of reestablishing an agriculture preserve and establishing a Williamson Act contract number 354. We've got 16 contiguous parcels totaling 3,171 acres total. In order to do this, we've got some actions that must be done first. One of them is the rescission of a development agreement that's in place for the Oak Canyon Ranch specific plan. Second action item will be for the general plan amendment to amend the general plan from the current Oak Canyon Ranch specific plan to Natural Resource Lands Agricultural Preserve. And finally, if you choose to establish the contract, we will need to consider a zoning amendment from the current zoning to the Ag Preserve Zone District to signify the Williamson Act. In case you don't know by now, the property is located approximately 1.3 miles southwest of the State Route 4 and Main Street intersection in Copperopolis. Here is a map of the entire Arola Ranch property.
Gina, can you hold on
Yes.
just a minute? I was just brought to my attention again that I did not open the public hearing, so
Oh,
open the public hearing. Now you can go.
sorry.
I fell asleep without the light.
Sleep at the wheel. That's okay. That's what lunch does to you. So just a little history on the property. The Arola family has been ranching this land since approximately 1949. In 1969, a portion of the ranch that was restricted by Ag Preserve contract number 35. In 1991, we started to see some changes occurring, lot line adjustments, rescission of existing contracts, reestablishment of new contracts, and then ultimately in 1996, the property or the Ag Preserve was non-renewed for the purposes of future development, in this case resulting in the Oak Canyon Ranch project. So just a little overview. The Oak Canyon Ranch project was approximately 3,000 acres of mixed-use residential resort development. In addition to that, came along with a specific plan. The board certified an environmental impact report, as well as the county and the developer entered into a development agreement, which is set to expire actually March 3rd, 2025. The landowner defaulted on the loan, and the property went back to the bank. And then in 2015, the Arola family actually purchased the ranch for the purposes of entering the land into a conservation easement and the Williamson Act. So again, a little bit of history. Subject to the Sustainable Agriculture Land Conservation Program, in June of 2016, the Board of Supervisors actually declared their support for an application by the California Rangeland Trust for state funding for the conservation easement. The Arolas entered into an agreement with the county, which included the rescission of the development agreement for Oak Canyon Ranch. In addition, they would also need to amend the zoning of the subject property consistent with the granting of the easement. The Board of Supervisors will need to approve all of these actions, not only for the purpose of the conservation easement, but it is absolutely necessary for you to consider the Williamson Act contract that's before you today. So right now, the application for Williamson Act or Ag Preserve, the agriculture operation that's currently on site is approximately 350 head of cattle grazing on the 3,000 plus acres of land. Again, as mentioned before, the Arola family has been on this property for approximately 70 years, and the land has been in livestock production. The farm advisor, just as all the others, has done a feasibility study showing that the land is capable of producing an annual income from agriculture far exceeding the minimum $2,000 requirement to enter into the ag preserve. In addition, the Arolas reported a gross annual income for 2016, again, far exceeding the minimum $2,000 requirement. So the land meets the 100-acre requirement. In addition, it is meeting the annual income requirement to maintain the Williamson Act. Your county general plan, or I should say our county general plan, actually indicates that agriculture is an important part of our county's economy. And keeping in mind, this land has been in production for 70 years. The conservation element encourages the Williamson Act contract for the preservation of agriculture land. In addition, the general plan's open space element also finds that land and water is a limited valuable resource and encourages open space. Your safety element has identified this land as being in a very high fire hazard area, which most of the county actually is, but reducing those fire fuels will come along with grazing the land, so that will actually reduce the fire hazard of the land if you maintain it in agriculture. Here is a picture of the fire hazard area map. The red illustrates the extreme fire hazard, and that mustardy color demonstrates a high fire hazard area. Surrounding area, if you'll notice the, sorry, I don't have my pointer, the purple color in the middle that says SP-CC, that is the specific plan area for the Oak Canyon Ranch subdivision. So let's just kind of talk about what you see surrounding that particular area. To the north, you'll find the Diamond 20 subdivision. As most of you know, that is large residential parcels with mix of agricultural uses. To the northwest, you'll find resource production land. Those are larger parcels of land for both residential and agricultural uses. To the south, you'll see future single-family residential, currently a large agricultural parcels. To the east is Saddle Creek Pacific Plan Copperopolis Community Center, which is all mixed-use residential, commercial, and recreational lands. There are thousands of acres surrounding this Copperopolis area that is currently in the Williamson Act, restricted by contract. And even though we're not making specific findings of consistency with the general plan update, I think it is important for us to understand what we are kind of projecting in the future along with the update. And again, if you'll notice, everything in the green, whether it be the light green, dark green, or chartreuse, is all natural resource land. So we have identified that the best use for this land surrounding this area is natural resource. A lot of it is currently in agriculture production, and we find that that if you actually amend the general plan and allow the Arolas to enter into the preserve, they will be right adjacent to additional lands that are currently in agriculture production and seen as resource production. So the agriculture preserve zoning is obviously applied to lands that are in the Williamson Act. That is for the protection and preservation of intensive agricultural and ranching production. The land is meeting the minimum requirement for Williamson Act, which is 100 acres, and only 50 acres actually for the ag preserve zoning. Under CEQA, there is a categorical exemption for open space contracts and easements, in addition to establishing agriculture preserves in Williamson Act. All these actions are necessary components to establish the Williamson Act contract and are all found exempt from CEQA. In conclusion, we have found that the land is viable agricultural land. We have demonstrated to you that there is general plan and zoning consistency with the proposed application. In addition, your Agricultural Advisory Committee and your Agricultural Commissioner did take into consideration this application, and they're recommending to you that you establish the Williamson Act contract. And finally, your Planning Commission considered all of these entitlements, and they too have recommended that you approve the entire project to establish the Williamson Act contract.
Any board questions or comments? Supervisor Mills?
Yes. Staff, could you look at page 360 or 389 of our packet, which is your declaration of support, the resolution of 2016?
289, did you say?
389.
389.
Getting there.
You see the resolution? Now, I want you,
389, this is the resolution from the Planning Commission?
389, 390, it might be 390 in the packet,
It's
actual
390,
packet page.
actually,
390.
389 is not.
Yeah.
390.
Maybe 390.
Like the online version must be a slightly different numbering. Okay.
You have the resolution.
Yes.
Go to the next page.
Oops. Oh, that is the resolution that was passed in 2016 by the then Board of Supervisors supporting the grant application that the Rangeland Trust had made.
That's not the problem, sir.
Okay.
I was not on the board.
He
I
was not on,
chair.
Mr. Tofinelli was not on the board at that time. This document is not a good document.
That's not even my signature.
I would say the same thing. I think Mr. Wooster would be pleased that I found that.
That is interesting how that.
Didn't even notice it.
Yeah, I wonder. I do not understand how that happened.
I just make a note for the record that we do not have the chairman of the board in 2016 having signed this resolution and presented it before the board.
That's not my signature.
So we do have that. We have the 2016 resolution with the 2016 board chair's signature. However, if this resolution was printed this year out of the item, it pulled the wrong signature.
Is that your
So it's a-
signature?
So a historical document,
System.
a historical document like that should be requested from the clerk's office.
Okay.
Or it should be verified that it has the right signatures on it before printing it out and including it in a packet.
That would be my mistake then.
Okay. I just wanted the
pulled it from
detail
IQM too.
pulled out into the public's view
Thank you.
before we got started. Okay?
Thanks for noticing it.
All right, thank you.
That's the only board comments, questions?
I wanted to add a little bit to Gina's presentation. You've received a lot of communication over the last several days, and there was quite a bit of discussion at the Planning Commission regarding circulation issues in this area. Certainly emergency access and egress is very important, not just for Copperopolis, but for all the communities in our county. And it's something that we need to look at very seriously going forward in the future. There is no requirement under the old, under the current development agreement or the specific plan that provides additional circulation for other projects to the south or out to Highway 4. There was some discussion between the prior owners and Castle and Cook, the developers of the Sawmill Lake project or the Saddle Creek project about doing a swap and granting an easement for some type of emergency access. That was not something that was ever recorded, nor something that the county was a party to. there really is no nexus between requiring additional rights-of-way or easements for future development or even existing development associated with this proposal to essentially rescind the development agreement and the other requests that would follow. But I think it's something that we need to look at in the future very carefully as we move forward, both with the general plan, the circulation element, and safety element requirements for providing emergency access. Unfortunately, this is not the venue for that. I know you received a petition with a number of signatures that suggests that we need to look at emergency access out of that area of Copperopolis, and I agree, we need to look at that. But we cannot hold that that burden on this applicant because of this, or the dual test of the nexus requirement, that the requirement be associated with the proposed development, and the Dolan test of rough proportionality, that the requirement be proportional to the impact that the proposal would have. Being that they're going from a lot of development, 2,000 residential units plus a commercial development, to agricultural land, there really wouldn't be a tie-in with what is proposed by this application and the county's ability to require or demand an exaction to dedicate an easement. But I think it's something that we need to look at very closely in the near future, given the recent fires over the last couple of years in a variety of communities throughout the state. So just wanted to add that to the discussion.
Do you want me to bring that up now? No, because I think that is an issue, but I don't see it as an issue that is going to burden a single landowner.
Right.
I think that we need, maybe it's a case of this board at some point directing staff or directing in the general plan update to be looking at pocketed subdivisions and to be looking at the single entrance exit subdivisions and also be looking at evacuation routes and evacuation plans. It's something that 20 years ago you would not have thought of. But I think that as time has marched on here and we've seen these growth spurts, we've kind of set that on the back burner and not really made it part of the primary reasoning. Now, the reason I say that is because I've fought 2 fires on Mineral Mountain. And that subdivision, as anybody who lives here knows, that's a one-way in, one-way out, very tight on a mountaintop. So those kind of things need to be addressed, but I don't see them in the context of what is here. And I've asked the fire district to weigh in and to give their opinion on what, but even in their case, they have the capacity within their own jurisdictional elements to make requirements or to request things to be done to benefit PR 4290 or 91. Those aren't things that we have to enforce from our side. That's something that they need to look at from their pre-fire planning profiles and say that's something that we need for the safety of the community. And they can do that.
Yeah. Well, I would agree, and I would suggest that maybe a future study session or some other avenue to discuss that further, from bringing in all the players that would be involved in that, from the Office of Emergency Services, fire districts, as well as the county, would be very, very important.
Because you mentioned the word future needs, but future needs encompasses the community as a whole. It doesn't just encompass a single parcel.
Oh, exactly, yeah. And it's not just future needs, it's current needs.
Correct.
We need,
Correct.
in many locations throughout the county, there are dead-end subdivisions with no way out in an emergency.
Right. So I just wanted that out there before a whole lot of public comment started so that everybody could understand what we're thinking.
That's the reason why I brought it up.
And Peter, there is nothing, what we're doing here today, preventing an agreement with the developer or the Rollas or anybody from putting an easement through at some time in an agreement for secondary access. If
The
that
private
happens, and
property
they
is-
meet together and they want to do it, they can do it. It's not precluding that.
Right.
If they want to do that, that's fine.
There's nothing precluding that exactly between the private property owners to negotiate some type of agreement between
Some
them.
type
yes.
of agreement and whatever, so.
Yeah, it is not our job to be the mediator or what I would call the thug in discussions between 2 property owners that literally belong in that venue. It doesn't belong here. And so I think that we really need to understand our role in these land use if it's a land use decision or even a general use decision, is where do we have our authority and where does our authority stop? And what is defensible and what's not defensible? And I want to be sure that whatever decisions we make, that we're doing it in the best interest of defending the public's good as a whole. Because what applies to one has to apply to all. And we have to see it that way.
Any other board questions or comments? If not, we'll open it up to public, oh, excuse me, the applicant, is the applicant here? Wish to say anything, speak? Okay, you'll have to come up to the podium and,
I'd like to reserve my comments until after public comment, if that would be acceptable.
I'll allow you to do it, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Public comments. You have to come to the podium.
This is my first time in this chamber, so forgive me if I
That's fine, we'll help you get
say
through it.
things that shouldn't be saying, but I did hear what has just been said. But I wanted to give you the residents that live in this area an understanding of how they feel about what's going on here. And I believe the most important responsibility of the Board of Supervisors is the safety of the people that live within the county in some fashion or another. You certainly are influential. I live in Saddle Creek Resort. Currently, hundreds of residents of Saddle Creek and all of the neighborhoods to the south of us on the west side of Lake Tulloch have only one evacuation route, and it's toward the north. Our evacuees must drive toward the fire, then compete with the rest of the Copper Valley population trying to escape over the Lake Tulloch Bridge to Highway 108. There are many choke points in this route, which could lead to widespread panic and loss of life. A road that parallels Little John on the west side of Saddle Creek is a necessary step toward an eventual solution, which would be an alternate and more expeditious evacuation route west of Lake Tulloch to Highway 108. In the meantime, the road would serve as an alternate evacuation route to Little John Copper Cove intersection for the people that reside south of Saddle Creek. The road will also provide a fire break in the currently unprotected site of Saddle Creek and access for first responders. You've heard that there's a petition out. It only started a couple of weeks ago. We've currently collected 214 names that requests the Board of Supervisors preserve the 2007 agreement for a road easement on the far eastern fringe of Oak Canyon Ranch. We would appreciate the Board of Supervisors either ensure preservation of this agreement or provide the residents compelling evidence that our assessment of wildfire risk is mistaken. Thank you. My name is David.
He's not, you're not actually required to. It's not a requirement.
Good afternoon, John Buckley with CSERC. Some of you know for many years our center is involved with all of the planning processes for Saddle Creek, Oak Canyon Ranch, and Tuscany Hills projects. County approval for Oak Canyon Ranch 15 years ago did not include any access extending to the south of the property, and that was intentional because the county and the developers acknowledged there would be significant growth inducement as well as environmental impacts, and that is still the case. Any approval of a road easement extending to currently undeveloped lands from the Arola property would immediately result in growth inducement with legal ramifications. Claims have been made that there was a Tuscany Hills approval promise by the county for a secondary access road. You can look very clearly in the EIR. The project actually specifies why the county was only approving the main road to the south boundary of the Tuscany Hills project site in order to avoid growth-inducing impacts from the project. It's in the EIR. There was never any action taken or any promises made by the county relative to a secondary access road from the Oak Canyon Ranch property. Another claim that's been mentioned is that there was a supposed legal road easement agreement between developers. There was never any CEQA analysis or any county approval of anything related to those developers making some agreement, and accordingly, whether or not bankruptcy voided the agreement, the fact is that agreement does not have any legal standing. I respectfully reemphasize that the county can't legally require the Arola family to allow a road easement across their property as a condition of approval for the applications before you today. The Supreme Court firmly determined in 2 separate decisions that any condition of project approval must demonstrate that the dedication will mitigate an impact to the project and that the level of dedication must be proportional to the impact. Here, the Arolas seek to do nothing more than preserve their property for ag use, and there's no legal justification for a road easement. I served 13 years as a firefighter. Our center fully supports Calaveras County considering easement, evacuation, and all those matters. But the county already determined in the Tuscany Hills approval that fire safety conditions were met, and it is not legal for the county to require a road easement, as has been pointed out, across the Arola property for a speculative project to the south that has never been through CEQA analysis and is currently only speculation. So in closing, I urge you to approve the application items before you today, and note that I've heard many times the board talk about the need for private property rights. The Arolas family is asking for their rights to not be forced to have an easement across their property. Thank you.
Greg Meyer from Copperopolis. Dave and I were the people involved with the circulating the petition that the 2 neighborhoods there, Copper Cove and Saddle Creek, were interested in. So I wanted to give a little bit of a different perspective. I'm a little discouraged, but I'm still going to give my perspective and comment a bit on the petition. The dangerous wildfires in Paradise in Malibu, California, and the loss of life made it clear that Calaveras County must work with the Copperopolis community to develop adequate evacuation routes in the case of emergencies. Presently, Little John Road is the access out of the southern area of Copper Cove and Saddle Creek Resort. The need for adequate traffic circulation will increase as additional already approved development takes place in the Copper Cove, Saddle Creek, and Tuscany Hills communities. There needs to be an alternative future road out of the western portion of the Copperopolis Basin. Currently, the Arola family is asking the county to give final approval on their effort to convert the former Oak Canyon Ranch project into an agricultural conservation easement. It should not go forward without addressing the public interest concerns. The board needs to take into consideration the agreements made during the Tuscany Hills approval process in July of 2007 between Castle and Cook, Tuscany Hills, and the Oak Canyon Ranch projects for the 26 acres needed to allow for the desirable safe secondary access. Previous requirements in place for this road as a result of the Oak Canyon Ranch project approval process were relied upon and perfected in these agreements. The current offer, I understand, is for an exchange of 52 acres for 26 acres of the Arola family's ranch. This is to provide for the route on the west side of the Saddle Creek Resort designed to connect to the intersection of Copper Cove Drive and Little John Road. The county approved Tuscany Hills with the consideration that these developers would work together and this road would become a reality when and if necessary at some future time. No thought was given that the Oak Canyon Ranch project would go away. The concerned members of the Copperopolis community involved with the Copperopolis Community Plan, the Lake Tulloch Alliance, various task force were listening to the board in these chambers discussing these things, and the newspapers were reporting on these items as well. Same 2-week period in July of 2007. Stockton Record. Calaveras County Supervisors today delayed a vote on the subdivision until July 24th to allow staff time to check the details of various agreements, complex projects.
Your time is up.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was hoping that because we're kind of representing 200 people, I might get a few extra seconds. Okay.
Time is up. It would not be fair to anybody else.
And that same one, the
Yes,
secondary
sir.
access.
Sir, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anthony Worcester, representing Calaveras County Taxpayers Association. Al couldn't be here today, so he asked me to come in his place. To put a condition on to the Areola Ranch would be an unconstitutional taking. Cannot legally be done. What we would like to see our Board of Supervisors act on would be to do something that's in our general plan, in the EIR for the general plan, and that is to start looking in the county, not just for Copperopolis, are the evacuation routes accessible? Are there locked gates? What kind of shape are they in? Are there enough to support the populations of people that will be needing them? And I would like to refer you to some language that's in the EIR for the general plan. Evacuation routes. Prepare a consolidated map of identified evacuation routes adopted in emergency response plans for reference at the planning department. Keep apprised of recommendations for emergency access egress routes included in the Calaveras County Community Wildfire Protection Plan, and facilitate incorporating proposed new evacuation routes into the county's regional transportation plan. And it goes on and on. There's much more to it, of course, but we'd just like to ask you for your policy direction to get our county departments, our planning department, our public works, emergency management, whatever, to get them really moving in this direction. We've all seen on TV the campfire and the swiftness of it, and I think this is it's certainly not something we want to burden the Areola family with. It's something that needs to be addressed by the county, and we would be ever so grateful if you folks would take this very seriously and work on the proper coordination between the fire departments, public works, whoever has to work on this, and to really see, well, how bad is the situation? What parts of the county are really prepared for fire or flood to evacuate safely? And I thank you so much for listening, and I will thank you even more, and all our taxpayers will thank you if you act on it. Thank you very much.
Good day. Ralph Copeland, D4, Copperopolis. The campfire's most significant growth period was a Thursday afternoon. It grew to 10,000 acres in 90 minutes, burning 100 yards per second. This is 1 football field per second. Laying those football fields end to end in 1 minute, the storm travels 3.4 miles. In 2 minutes, the storm travels 7 miles. That's 2 minutes, 7 miles. By coincidence, my home in Copperopolis, near the Kiva boat launch, is 7 miles from Highway 4. The normal travel time is 10 minutes. If my family were to encounter such a firestorm, we're dead in 2 minutes. Even if we attempt to get to the lake water, we need to do this in less than a second. Guess what? We're dead. The October 2017 Northern California wildfires jumped over many 2- and 4-lane roads and even 6+ lanes of concrete on Highway 101. The firestorm blasted through suburban neighborhoods and exclusive neighborhoods that featured fairly wide streets, wider than most fire breaks. Even during the recent Malibu firestorms in Southern California, they jumped over a 6-lane highway. So I ask, why are we discussing a magical roadway with mystical fire breaks? Will it improve my 2-minute window of survival? Is it superior to the 6 concrete lanes of Highway 101? Is it superior to the 6-lane highway in Southern California? We understand Copperopolis is going to grow and expand. This is why we need to secure these open spaces and secure them now so we can legally and correctly develop our infrastructure. Finally, I add this. In order to promote this roadway, Mr. Hicks has resorted to using our recent California firestorm disasters to promote fear and false hope among those in Copperopolis. But Mr. Hicks doesn't need to create these exceptions. Mr. Hicks is well-versed in senior and low-income housing. I suggest you first apply these talents in order to begin a sincere relationship with Copperopolis. Thank you.
Hello, my name is George Burkhart. I'm a Copperopolis homeowner and landowner of 25 years. I purchased a home in Connor Estates 25 years ago. I was on the first board of directors. I just finished my second tour of duty on the board of directors. And Connor Estates was originally 3 phases. Developer went bankrupt within the first few years. The 2 other parcels were sold. The 2 other phases are now called Calypso Bay and Peninsula Estates. Connor Estates has 130 residents. Peninsula Estates has 30. Peninsula Estates started to build up, and the homeowners in Peninsula Estates, not thinking of safety, decided we don't want to have all the Connor Estates people driving through our development as well as into their own, using the 2 access egress points that were a requirement for the development originally, 2 points for safety reasons. So they were determined they were going to fence off, one of them fence the road off. Our board said, can't do that. Nope, we're doing it. We want to do that. The reason why that never happened was because the county acted responsibly for safety reasons and told Peninsula Estates, you cannot close off the secondary egress route for Connor Estates. And that's the way it is today. So I urge the board, in your many responsibilities, please pay attention to your most important, which is safety of the citizens within Calaveras County, and do whatever you need to do to make sure this additional safety route is put in. Thank you very much.
Any other public comments? And if you wish, if there's any other people that would like to make public comment, can you please line up in the back of the room? Go ahead.
My name is Sheldon Toso. My address is 1014 Archwood Lane. Before I get to my request, I would like to give you a little background. When Diamond 20 was developed, Horseshoe Drive was not completed to my home. Old Highway 4 was active at the time, and it was the access to my property. Old Highway 4 connected my home and lot to Little John, the Snake Trail. Part of the Diamond 20 development was the extension of Horseshoe Drive to my lot and to continue on Old Highway 4 to Little John, which would have been the secondary access to that portion of the project. In 1972, the state abandoned Old Highway 4 to the county. In 1979, Resolution 79545 by the County Board of Supervisors abandoned the portion of Horseshoe Drive to my lot and to Little John, the Snake Trail. Resolution 79545 landlocked my property. In 1999, the county permitted a manufactured home to be permitted on my lot. As part of the home being permitted on the lot, and the fact that Old Highway 4 was the only access to my lot, the county created Ox Yoke Lane, which consisted of Old Highway 4 from my lot to Little John, the Snake Trail. Ox Yoke Lane, which consists of APN number 54-006-0011 and APN number 54006-018 are two properties affected by the Arola request. It should be noted that the County Tax Assessor's Office has been very uncooperative in our efforts to resolve this issue. A lawsuit 17CV42757 has been filed in an effort to resolve these issues. My requests are, first, to remove the two parcels, 54611 and 54618, from this request that affect Oak Lane until the lawsuit 17CV42757 can be resolved. My second request is, I'm requesting that the county complete that portion of Horseshoe Drive that was abandoned in the resolution to my property, unlandlocking my property. If you don't do that, I will lose my house. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I just want to be a voice of dissent in the chorus of people imploring you to protect their safety as your first priority. My request would be that you protect my liberty and my property rights and let me deal with my safety. And also, I don't believe it's appropriate or even legal for you to even be giving any consideration to enforcing a contract that is no longer valid and was made with someone else on a present property owner any more than you could enforce someone else's contracts on me. And I'll leave it there for now, but really, please, let me deal with my safety. You guys have a lot of power to undermine my property rights and my liberty in general, and I would really appreciate you focusing on those and less than my safety. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Good afternoon, Chair and Board of Supervisors. We sent detailed comments. I think you probably read them. I just will summarize a couple points and a couple new additions. As you know, the Arolas have been leasing and grazing cattle on this ranch for over 60 years, and the general plan encourages preservation of productive agricultural lands. The previous owners amended the general plan back in 1997 for the Flowers Ranch, and these owners want to amend the general plan back to the way it was then. So we encourage you to let them put it back to the way it was then, the general plan, and it's been kept in agriculture all these years anyway. If the Oak Canyon Ranch development agreement is rescinded, the Copperopolis area will actually benefit because there will be more water, road capacity, and other resources available for other proposed developments and planned developments. The Oak Canyon Ranch was approved for 3,475 residential units and 300,000 square feet of commercial. By eliminating this amount of development, this will free up the road capacity and the water supply for use by others, reducing the need for extensive road and water expansions and expenditures. The Arolas also need this agriculture preserved land use designation for economic purposes to reduce an unfair property tax burden. The specific plan zoning is a highly taxed, highly assessed property tax, and this does not allow them to put their land into a Williamson Act contract, which would reduce the property taxes. Taxes should be assessed only on the actual cattle ranching use of the land for the economic benefit of the county and the cattle ranching operation. As has been repeated by the planning department, the county has never taken any action to endorse, approve, or promise a secondary road access through these lands, and we encourage you not to do that. And basically, As has been pointed out, there's no nexus to the application and a future need for a road. The Arolas are not creating more traffic and housing, they're actually reducing it. So in summary, there's many good reasons to approve this application. If the county does look at future road options, this does not preclude future road options in the area. This is still a possibility in the area. The Arolas also can make private agreements to have access through their property. So please support productive agriculture in Calaveras County and the rights of property owners not to develop, and do not hold them hostage to afford a closed upon agreement. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Good afternoon. Kenneth Arola, attorney for Arolas. I just wanted to address Mr. Toso's comment there. He did file a lawsuit to claim a prescriptive easement over what they call the old Highway 4, which parallels the new Highway 4. His lot actually has legal access over Horseshoe Drive. The problem is the developer never finished a bridge to cross Little John Creek. So as an accommodation, the prior owners of the Arola Ranch allowed him to use the old Highway 4 all these years. His attorney decided that they wanted to establish a prescriptive easement, so they filed this lawsuit. It is our opinion that even if he were to win hands down this lawsuit, and he has sued other neighbors too over some boundary line problems, but even if he were to win hands down, it would not affect the egg preserve or any of the things we're doing here today. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Good afternoon. Tom Hicks. I'm representing the Golden State Equity Group that is the owner of the Tuscany Hills property. So I'm here to speak on two things. One, I'd like to correct the record because the gentleman in the back here used my name, said I was circulating the petition and raising fear. I had nothing to do with the petition. I was a signer of it, but just to correct the record, it wasn't my petition. It was a petition started by a couple folks that live at Saddle Creek. So, sorry?
Talk to the board. Can you please talk to the board? And okay. He's speaking now.
Yes. So my point is that I think the Arolas have the absolute right to turn their land into ag land. We support it. I wrote a letter to the board supporting that action. We have no issue with that whatsoever. I do want to bring up, and I think it was brought up by another speaker, that they were offered a trade of 52 acres of the sawmill property, the southern end, for it. So there's been a fair amount of talk today about the burden being put on them. I think that with that trade of the 52 acres for 26 acres is not a burden, so it's obviously up to them to agree to that. I'd just like to go on record saying that I think if the board doesn't have the power to make that agreement, I would certainly encourage the Arolas to follow through with it for public safety reasons in the future. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Marty Crane. So I think it's become abundantly clear that the board cannot impose this on one landowner. So we keep talking about things that aren't before us here, such as public safety, but I'm encouraged that after all these years talking about one way in, one way out, evacuation routes, which I first heard about up in West Point, and I went, these people talk to each other, that we have a whole bunch of people in the room now. So when the board makes the decision to really put a focus on this, I invite all these people that are interested and worried about public safety and fire safety to come back, please, to those and join in those discussions. But I think we know today what's before us, and that's not before us right now. But please make it a priority. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Seeing no public comments, the applicant still wishes to speak.
Yes, I'm Bill Arola. Good afternoon, supervisors. Thank you for letting me go last. This way it can really be shortened up here quite a bit. Before you today is our application, and what it amounts to is establishing or reestablishing the Williamson Act contract on the ranch. This will allow our family and future generations to continue the ranching tradition that we have established here in Calaveras County for more than 160 years. So with that, I was going to go into some other issues, but I don't think it's really necessary at this time. I would just ask you to please honor our family's property rights and approve our application as presented. Thank you very much.
And with that, I will close the hearing. I will bring it back to the board for questions, deliberations, motions, any of the above. Supervisor Mills, your light's on.
I'm sure this is a controversial issue for a lot of people. I was in the audience in June of 2016 when this was brought up, sitting right there in the back. But I think that, we want to rally around the point of fire protection. If that was to be an issue, would it not have been better to have been discussed as part of Saddle Creek in creating a green space buffer on the west edge of Saddle Creek back when that DA was put in place? But instead to now take and say that it's the responsibility of the landowner that's adjacent to him, that somehow is his responsibility? I'm having difficulty with that leap. In talking about fire evacuation and firestorms, I don't know how many of these people, I know one gentleman spoke to the fact that he was a firefighter. And I too have been a firefighter, and I've been in firestorms. It's the difference between being in the service and going to war. And until you've been there, you really don't understand the nature of people. But at the same time, the safety of the community, it has to be looked at in a broader perspective than just this one project. It has to be looked at as a sphere. I know one gentleman had discussed perfected agreements of some type. To me, perfecting an agreement means that there's something filed as notices, there's something on the land that's there as an agreement. I don't see that that's there. He's not creating a more intensive use. If you were wanting to do more than what you're doing now, then there would be reason to want to talk about some mitigating circumstances, Mr. Rolla. I don't see that. So I think that by simply having this in front of us, we're in a situation where we don't have a whole lot of latitude to do more than what you've been doing all along. So, by the way, I understand your loss in the Donald fire. So, I think that we talk about CCWD, we talk about water, we talk about sewer. Yeah, it's going to improve what availability and infrastructure availability will be there. But again, I would think that if we're going to talk about evacuation routes and fire safety and all of that, we need to look at it from the community plan perspective. We need to look at it from the general plan perspective, and we need to see it for the whole of what it is rather than just an individual property owner. Because we can't arbitrarily be taking from one to the benefit of others without just cause. And that means we'd have to create some findings. We'd have to create some reasonings to do that. And I don't think there's sufficient reasonings here with what the staff has written to give us that latitude. So if there's others who would like to discuss this, if not, I will make a motion. I will make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Supervisor Mills, a second by Supervisor Clapp. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to item number 23. Madam Clerk.
Item 23 is from the Planning Department to conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution amending the general plan of the subject properties from the Oak Canyon Ranch specific plan to natural resource lands, agricultural preserve for William A. and Dolores J. Arola, trustees of the Arola 2015 Revocable Trust. This project is categorically exempt from CEQA.
And with that, I will open the public hearing on this item. Gina?
Okay, so part two, part one, we just rescinded the development agreement for Oak Canyon Ranch. So part two now is a resolution to amend the general plan from the Oak Canyon Ranch specific plan to natural resource lands agricultural preserve for the purpose of establishing the contract.
Is there any board comments, questions on this item? Supervisor Clapp, your light is on? No? Okay. Does the applicant wish to make any statements? No? Any public comments on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the hearing. I'll bring it back to the board, look for discussion, a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve.
We have a motion by Supervisor Clapp,
I'll second.
second by Supervisor Mills. Any other comments or questions? No? Deliberations? Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to item number 24, Madam Clerk.
Item 24 is from the Planning Department to conduct a public hearing and adopt an ordinance approving the zoning amendment to agricultural preserve to recognize Williamson Act Contract Number 354 for the Arola 2015 Revocable Trust and authorize a summary publication.
And with that, I will open the public hearing. Peter, you're going to take this one? Or
Well, the
Gina?
only concern I have was
I just saw
that
you turn your light.
typically the agricultural preserve comes first. I'm not sure why it got reversed in the
I don't know.
agenda.
They're slightly out of order, so the last item, the next item should be the item that we're considering now, but
So we
it
can-
sounds
we
as
can-
though
we can-
we've all...
I can close the public hearing, and we can go back and go with 25, and then come back to 24. So if you would like, Madam Clerk, can we go to item 25, and we will return to 24?
And is that the only correction?
Yes.
Okay.
Would it be necessary for purpose of protocol to call for a motion to,
Table it on?
no, what do you call it?
Rescind.
Yeah, to rescind? I am one of the majority voters, so therefore, motion to reconsider.
There was no action taken on this item. We just opened it. We hadn't even had the discussion or any motion on it yet, so there's no
I don't want to
decision
get in
made.
front of it.
Yeah, we went to 24, and she's saying 25 should be in front of 24, and we haven't heard 24.
Okay,
So I
thank you.
closed that public hearing, put it on hold, we're going to 25.
Item 25 is from the Planning Department to conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution establishing an agricultural preserve and Williamson Act Contract Number 354 for William A. and Dolores J. Arola, trustees of the Arola 2015 Revocable Trust for 3,171.72 acres.
And with that, I will open the public hearing.
So third action, need to establish the contract for Williamson Act as the third item in this whole packet of...
Supervisor Mills, your light is on. Any questions, comments?
No, just public comment.
No? Okay. The applicant have anything to say? No? Public comments on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back for deliberation.
I'll make the motion to approve.
I have a motion by Supervisor Clapp,
I'll second it.
a second by Supervisor Mills. Call for a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Now
I'm sorry, could you please, I didn't catch the vote. I was talking.
5-0.
I'm sorry. No, who made the motion and who made the
motion?
second?
Supervisor Clapp made the motion, and Supervisor Mills seconded it.
Thank you.
And the vote was 5-0.
Thank you.
We will now go back to item number 24. Madam Clerk.
On my way. Okay. Item 24 is from the Planning Department to conduct a public hearing and adopt an ordinance approving the zoning amendment to agricultural preserve to recognize Williamson Act Contract Number 354 for the Arola 2015 Revocable Trust and authorize the summary publication.
And I will now reopen this item, the public hearing.
Okay, last but not least, we need to amend the zoning to the agriculture preserve zone, which reflects the Williamson Act for this entire Williamson Act contract.
Any board comments, questions? Not? The applicant have anything to say? No? Okay, any public comments? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the board, look for a motion.
Motion approved.
Have a motion by Supervisor Clapp.
I'm gonna go home early today.
I'll second it.
Supervisor Mills, do I have a second?
Yeah, you have a second.
Yeah. Call for a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. That's the same order of motions and seconds. So. All right, we'll give it a couple minutes for the crowd to clear. Is the whole room clearing?
You're welcome to stick around.
Okay. You're welcome to stick around. We'll take a 5-minute break. 5 minutes. All right, we're back from break. We're going on to item number 26. This is administrative office item.
Is to adopt a resolution continuing emergency contracting procedures pursuant to Public Contract Code Chapter 2.5, Section 22050 for emergency repair work necessary to skylight structures to the roofs of buildings A, D, and E of the county government campus.
Hello again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Bonnie Rich Administration. This is a standing item for an update to the roof repair to buildings A, D, and E. We issued the notice to proceed to Alcira Roof Company on November 13th with work commencing November 14th. That weekend, the contractor completed the repairs to the skylight doghouse structures on building D. Then we had the Thanksgiving holiday last weekend. The contractor completed the work on building E, and weather permitting, the the work to building A will be completed this weekend. We did have to issue a change order. What we discovered as the skylights, the plywood was being pulled back. And I want to remind the board that when the inmates put these structures up more than 22 years ago, they were intended to be temporary. They used 1/2-inch plywood. The spec called for 5/8-inch plywood. So when we started peeling back the layers and the scope of work required the contractor to replace any dry rot with the 5/8-inch, clearly it's not going to match up with a 1/2-inch. So we issued a change order for all 3 buildings to have a complete tear-off of the 1/2-inch plywood and replacement of 5/8 per architectural specifications. That change order is in the amount of $12,000. And then, I'm not sure where my facility manager is. I was going to have Patrick give you an update on phase 2. So weather permitting, phase 1 will be completed this weekend. And then further review of the materials that we're proposing to use for the sealing of the seal coat, we have determined that that has a lifespan of 7 to 10 years, and it makes a lot more sense to do that seal coating. We're going to pressure wash. It's a asphalt concrete material. We're going to pressure wash that, seal it, paint it and seal it, or seal it and paint it. I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure where Patrick is. He was right here a minute ago. We are proposing to do that, which will ultimately end up saving the county literally hundreds of thousands of dollars rather than do a complete tear-off, or develop the bid specs to do a complete tear-off and replace. The only concern, and I will let Patrick come up and speak to that process, is where the pitch of the roof ends, there are flat areas. And we believe we are going to need to do some replacing of the downspouts and the fascias around those flat areas of the roofs. Patrick, can you talk a little bit more about phase 2, please?
I am very sorry.
Kill that.
Incredibly rude. Good afternoon, gentlemen. As far as the dog houses go, 2 of the 3 buildings are complete. Last weekend, we finished Building D. This upcoming weekend, we've got good weather, so Building A will be complete, which is finalizing Phase 1. So Phase 2 consists of the lower area, which I would call a tar and gravel application that you see below the asphalt shingle roofs that we're putting on now. There were a couple of ways to go about looking at that project, but from what I'm finding out now is we have a very high-end product on there now, which is called a Stockton type roof. So it's a lightweight concrete with gravel that's in the lightweight concrete, and over that is an epoxy coating. So these type roofs last literally as long as the building that is supporting all of this. So we have the opportunity, instead of doing a tear-off, which is pretty typical at 50 years on a roof cycle, then all we have to do is mitigate any of the rot that we've had from prolonged lack of maintenance at the drains. So where the drains do occur, we have found a couple of areas that will need some remedial work, which it just means taking up the lightweight concrete product, getting down to the sub, putting down new sub, covering that, and then the secondary coat will go over the whole thing. So with the idea was that this is a 7 to 10 year roof, and the only reason that is because every 7 to 10 years that roof coating needs to be replaced just to continue the longevity of the roof. So it is a permanent fix, but it is shorter term than a 30-year comp that just sits there by itself for 30 years. This is a less expensive one coat application that needs to be done every 7 to 10 years to maintain the life of the roof. So Phase 2 will be that application, and we will do some preliminary work before that time to find out where any rot needs to be done and any of the drains need to be tuned up to allow the water off the roof to the ground.
Supervisor Mills?
Any crickets up there?
Oh, there's a lot of squirrels. And,
No, I'm talking about crickets being the...
Yes, yeah, the davit bases.
Yeah.
Yeah, when Public Works had facilities, they actually did put in safety features up there. So
Okay.
they are currently in place, and they were done quite well, so they can just go right over those.
They're in good shape, and the
Yes.
scuppers are good too?
Yes.
Okay.
Supervisor Platt?
Yeah, you said that we had 5/8 and they replaced with a half?
No,
Half and they replaced 5/8?
vice versa, yes.
Okay, so I've done jobs before, and I would go down, because it's half-inch structural, and I'd go to like a 5/8 CDX. But the half-inch structural will actually be stronger, so you could actually go back and replace that with half-inch structural and still meet your specs.
Yeah, unfortunately, the half-inch was not structural, and it was 30 years old, so we opted to, instead of replacing just the tail ends and then putting another layer of half-inch on top of that, that would have created the opportunity for moisture barrier between the two, so that's why we opted to go the better way of ripping off the non-structural half and putting down 5/8, and then that will take us through a full 30-year warranty.
Any other questions, comments? Any public comments, questions?
I was here the first time this was discussed, but I don't remember the numbers. What's the total amount that's been allocated, plus 12,000, and from what funding source do these monies come from?
I apologize, Mr. Chair, I didn't hear all of what Bonnie asked. Could you repeat, please?
Yeah, she asked, what's the total amount of this contract? And on top of that, it's 162, and on top of that, it's 12,000, makes it 174 at this point. And this money, it was part of our budget, and it's coming from CIP monies.
Correct.
Yeah, so,
Certificates of participation, non-general fund dollars.
non-general fund certificate of participation.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I'll close the public, come back and look for a motion, discussion, any more questions? Yeah, we have a resolution, so we'll need a motion to accept the resolution extending the emergency.
So moved.
So, a motion by Supervisor Mills,
I'll second it then.
second by Supervisor Clapp. Call for a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to item number 27, clerk of the board, appoint members, I'm sorry.
Item 27 is to appoint members to the Calaveras County Resource Conservation District. The Resource Conservation District was established in 2016, and this is the first round of term expirations. The Resource Conservation District, or RCD, has requested that the Board of Supervisors make the appointments as opposed to them going to an election. So we have a vacancy for a term expiring 11/30/2022 for a member-at-large 1. And we have a vacancy for a term expiring 11/30/2022, member-at-large 2. And we have 4 applications for these 2 positions. One is from Charles Sid Beckman. He is currently appointed to the RCD. Another is from Tim Johnson. Another is from Tom Sullivan, who is currently seated on the RCD. And the 4th is from Margaret Peggy Williams. So 2 applications would need, if you chose to appoint 2 to these 2 positions.
So we have a board discussion on preferences for 2 of the 4.
I do, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I would make a recommendation that we keep the incumbent, Mr. Beckman and Mr. Sullivan.
Any other board comments? No? Okay, so I'll open up to public.
No, I'm not done. Okay, so the next one.
Well, I thought we'd take them one at a time.
All right.
Okay, we'll do this one. And, no, okay, let's go forward.
Okay, so the other is for 1 vacancy for a term expiring 11/30/2022 for a wastewater representative. You have 1 application from Robert Dean, who is currently seated on the RCD.
Okay. So, any other comments on that?
Mr. Chair, I would recommend we keep the incumbent, Mr. Dean.
Okay. With that being said, any public comments on either one of these? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board.
By the way, Mr. Dean has been active with the Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Basin Authority for the RCD, so he does bring an additional piece to the table in that discussion.
So do I hear a motion for the 2 incumbents for the first part of it and the incumbent for the second?
I'll move the item, Mr. Chair.
A second.
Motion by Supervisor Olivera, second by Supervisor Mills. Any other comments? Not, call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. And Madam Clerk, you got that? Yes, okay. I was going to do, because we had 4 for the one, and it was, yeah, okay, fine. Moving on to the final item on the regular agenda, supervisor announcements. Madam
Chair?
Clerk. Yes.
Before we move on to the supervisor announcements, there was one thing that I wanted to bring to the board's attention and to ask if the board would consider adding a non-agenda item. As you are aware, the Brown Act generally prohibits any action to be taken if it's not properly agendized. However, there are 3 specific situations in which the board can act on an item that is not on the agenda. And this has to do with the presidential declaration of tomorrow being a National Day of Mourning. Just for, one of 2 things. For Brown Act purposes, in order to add something that is not on the agenda, one of the 3 ways you can add an item that is not on the agenda is on a 2/3 vote of the board. You need to determine if there is a need for immediate action and that the need to take action came to the attention of the local agency subsequent to the agenda being posted. This exception does require a degree of urgency, and the item cannot be considered if staff knew or should have known about the issue before the agenda was posted. Before adding any item, the board would need to make two determinations. One, that there is an immediate need to take action, and two, that the need arose after the posting of the agenda. And then if the board does make those findings, the item is added to the agenda, the item can be discussed, and the board can take action. The reason that I am bringing this to this board's attention is, as you heard earlier, county offices we're going to be closed tomorrow based on the presidential declaration that tomorrow, December 5th, was a national day of mourning for the passing of President George H.W. Bush. Our county code specifies, I can pull it up just so there's clarification, and Section 2.64665, it lists all of the county holidays. And in subsection A11, it provides for any day appointed by the President of the United States or the governor of the state for a public fast, Thanksgiving, or holiday. Based on that code section, that is why HR moved forward with making the announcement earlier today. Subsequent to that, and as the meeting was progressing, it was brought to my attention that although our county code provides for that, our MOUs are actually contrary to our county code in that they also generally require the board's approval of identifying this declaration as a county holiday. And so because, one, we were not aware of this when the agenda was posted last week, it was just brought to our attention that the declaration was made yesterday. It was made on the 1st, but it was brought to staff's attention yesterday. And based on the, to be consistent with not only the county code, but also with the MOUs, I am asking that the board consider adding this to the agenda, making the specific findings under the Brown Act to add an item that is not otherwise agendized, so that you can then take action to identify tomorrow as a county holiday for purposes of being consistent with the presidential declaration.
You know, board comments?
You looking for a motion?
Huh?
Looking for a motion?
Well, we're looking for a motion, yes, to first off, add it to the agenda because it was an emergency and it came up after a posting of our agenda. So, yes, I'm looking for a motion for that.
I would move that.
You would move that?
I'd second it.
We have a second of that. Is there any public comments before we go forward? Okay, so I have a motion and I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. With that being said, now it's on our agenda and we can bring it up and discuss it as to whether we would like to pass a motion saying that we are closed for mourning tomorrow, December 5th, observing a national holiday in honor of President Bush.
As the president has proclaimed.
Yes, as presidential, and it would be solely a one-day holiday, not a continuing December 5th item, just for one day tomorrow.
Mr. Chair, I have a question on the motion.
Sure.
Being it's a holiday, and referencing the MOUs, is that a paid holiday for our employees? I'd like to make that perfectly clear.
Yes.
Yes, that is why the request is being made.
All right, thank you.
How does this affect the JPAs? Joint Powers Authorities. They're a function of government. Are they required to observe as well?
That is something that, because of the urgency of this, I have not looked into. The assumption being our county code is specific to county permanent employees.
Okay.
And I don't believe that any JPA would qualify within the county code for purposes of county permanent employees.
It's on them to do it.
And as it was pointed out, We're not employees, so.
Yeah. We're reminded of
tomorrow,
that constantly.
Okay, so I'm looking for a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion by Supervisor Mills. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second by Supervisor Clapp. Any public comments? If not, call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. All right, now we'll go into announcements.
In compliance with AB 1234, chaptered as Government Code Section 53232.3D, board members shall provide brief reports on meetings they attended at the expense of the local agency at the next regular meeting of the legislative body. This report is required to include meetings attended for which there has been expense reimbursement, mileage, meals, lodging, etc., but may also, at the board member's discretion, include any other meeting attended by the supervisor on behalf of the county.
We'll start with Supervisor Clapp.
Well, I hope I'm still going to the chamber meeting tomorrow morning, since we just maybe canceled it, and I have an area 12 Friday, that I have nothing to report out that you guys cost you a dime.
Supervisor Mills.
Attended the Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Basin Authority on the 14th. On the 15th, there seems to be some movement afoot from Metropolitan Water District, and I did go to Sacramento to talk to them, along with Aqua and the Mountain Counties Water and U.S. Forest Service, about establishing their own legislative presentation here in the next session. I know SPI has also been involved in this discussion, and they felt that it was an opportunity for them to feel, rather than be at the mercy of the water board or be at the mercy of whoever is trying to control as an authority, that they would have the opportunity here to, in essence, create their own destiny and decide their own policy, what they could do is best, that they know how to do it. Also, Mary Pitto is retiring from RCRC, and that will be on the 6th. And I'll be attending that. And on the 14th, I have a meeting with Congressman McClintock on Lake Tulloch. And there is a desire from Tuolumne County to get some kind of a cooperative agreement between the two counties for Lake Tulloch, so that we can kind of be on the same page as far as policy is concerned. And I'll keep you informed on how that goes.
Okay. Supervisor Oliveira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. After enjoying a good holiday Thanksgiving dinner with the family, I proceeded to San Diego to attend the CSAC General Conference for 2018. While there, I attended a number of workshops. More importantly was the workshop that we spoke about today regarding the homeless situation statewide. I did hear comments regarding the involvement of CSAC and other government agencies, and I can assure you that that is a top priority with the 58 counties in the state of California. I was able to learn through that workshop the cooperation on a state level with the funding available and trickling down, if you will, to the counties. Our county representation, of course, didn't meet the extent and the funding that we have in our larger suburban and urban counties, but I must say through the rural caucus, we did have a voice, and we are getting funding for that problem. The funding will be proportioned as far as the problems in our counties versus the larger counties, but we are getting help from the state. I attended other workshops, and one of the more important workshops, which I found to be a prime example of what's happened here in Calaveras County, and that's the issue of we are beating each other over the head. We talked about party lines, we talked about issues that are being discussed, and a variety of issues. They had a very good presentation at the general session by a professor from Stanford that really laid out exactly what's been happening over the last 4 to 6 years in our country and right here in Calaveras County. I walked away from that workshop with a different view of things. And I guess the best thing that I could bring forth to this county is we need to start talking with each other. Instead of putting on the blinders, instead of taking care of our own agendas, if you will, we need to start realizing that we are doomed unless we start putting down some honest effort to sit and talk with each other. Unfortunately, I won't be part of that program, but I leave you with that thought. I'm not trying to change your minds. You need to talk to each other. And that means everybody. This board, our constituents, our department heads. We need to make a concentrated effort to make this program work, because without that effort, it's not going to work. I also attended general sessions, the CSAC election of officers. I'm very proud. I also had the opportunity to attend the installation of our Madam Clerk, Diane, and the Clerks Association. Thank you for the invite. I will say that that was my last meeting for CSAC. And I would hope that this board and the new board make a very, very concentrated effort to maintain the representation of CSAC. You have to attend those meetings, and you have to be part of that discussion. Because if not, then you aren't doing your job, and this county will fail. Keep those relationships. I would hope that someone would be the active representative of NACO. We've made great strides just by being there at those events, and I know that's expensive to belong to those organizations. But you have to have that voice. You have to have that voice. If we're going to get along, you better be there. And you better be there talking and listening. So, thank you for the opportunity to attend. That's all I have.
Supervisor Garamendi.
Well, I do not have any travel budgets. I did not attend the CSAC meeting, although I agree with Supervisor Olivera. It is important that we do there. We're going to have to revisit this in the next budget because I think we're going to miss out on stuff where we should be participating. But so no, I didn't cost anybody any money the last couple weeks, and that's my report.
Well, I was kind of beat to the punch when that came to my announcement. I was going to bring up the fact that the emergency ordinance or resolution that we passed, but I was kind of beat to the punch there a little bit. That's okay. I just want to remind everybody that we are closed tomorrow. The county will be closed tomorrow. It will be a paid holiday for the employees. And Dennis brought up a point about JPAs because there is apparently we are going to have a COG meeting tomorrow. We have a scheduled COG meeting at 5:30 here in these chambers. And I think he was alluding to the fact as to apply to the JPAs. And I did talk to Amber Collins, and she in fact did verify that we will have a meeting tomorrow at 5:30.
Before we move on to staff, one thing to bring back to the discussion here, and it alludes to what these two gentlemen had just said, is that who would have thought that the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California would be talking to the Mountain Counties Water Association and also discussing the Bay Delta Plan and their part of this in a rational, civil way. That doesn't mean it's a us versus them, that they suddenly realize that they have a role to play in the source counties and the water that comes from here. That is the steps that have been taken since June, and I hope that this board will continue to push forward in those decisions and be a participant in them.
All right, moving on to staff. CAO, Mr. Lutz.
I would just add, piggybacking on the office closures, after the board took action, I 3 minutes ago sent out a press release to media outlets to hopefully also get the word out for people trying to come to the office tomorrow for general services. Obviously, essential services will continue to operate, including our sheriff's department, snow removal crews if we have snow upcountry, as will the solid waste, both the waste facility and the transfer stations will still be operating.
Thank you for clarifying that. County Council? Nothing? Madam Clerk, your light is on.
So I also wanted to report that I attended the CSAC conference last week in San Diego and attended the California Clerk of the Board of Supervisors Association meeting tracks. We had several workshops that were focused around people, process, and technology. There was a lot of great ideas there and a lot of great networking with clerks with similar challenges. I also wanted to say that I wanted to thank Supervisor Oliveira and his wife and Krista Von Lotta from the administrative office for attending the installation of officers, where I was installed as secretary, and I'm very proud to represent Calaveras County.
Very nice. Great. With that,